high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hey everybody, it's Mike Walsh. Welcome to the Talking Catholic podcast. I am solo this week. My beloved co-hosts are quite busy, so I'm holding up the mantle. So you're sort of getting the Boys of Summer edition version of this, where it's a lot of me this summer. We're going to change things up a little bit today. I do have a guest, and I'll be inviting her on in a few minutes. But I wanted to sort of talk about some of the things that are going on in the Catholic sphere, because it got me to thinking. We were putting together our beloved Catholic Star-Herald newspaper this week, and I was really impressed by the fact that you can see that life is very much getting back to normal. There's activity again going on in the parishes and around the different dioceses. You can see there's a lot of effort being made to really be proactive on a number of different fronts. Big news in New Jersey this week was that the state deputies, a new state deputy for the Knights of Columbus was announced. State Deputy James Stover was installed. He's from the Diocese of Trenton. Our own New Jersey State Secretary is Ray Sands. And then James Sweeney as the state treasurer, Russell Petrocelli as the state advocate, and Scott Williams as the state warden. You know, the Knights of Columbus are a great organization across the world, actually. But in the state of New Jersey, as someone who's worked with the Knights a lot, it's always, a special moment for me to see these different moments of normalcy come back, because the Knights of Columbus had a really tough time during the pandemic. This is a group of people that are committed to really service in their communities above almost anything else. Certainly spirituality, of course, but everything they do is in the duty to spirituality. But it's the service that so many Knights really seem to gravitate to, and being able to be of help in their parishes and their communities. So one of those signs that seeing the Knights getting back together was the installations of the new officers in the state. So it was a great thing to see. Bishop Bukowski from Judson and Bishop O'Connell from Trenton were on hand to install the new officers. And if you want to read more about it, you can check it out in the Catholic Star-Herald. But it was one thing I really wanted to point out this week, is it's another sign of normalcy coming ahead. Another sign of normalcy is advocacy. As you know, all of us are committed to the pro-life movement as good Catholics. And one of the things we need to be aware of is that there's a lot of things going on at the state level, at the federal level, that may have an impact on the pro-life movement. The New Jersey Catholic Conference, which is the legislative wing, lobbyist wing, that all the dioceses of New Jersey take part in, recently put out a statement earlier this month encouraging people to take an active role in some federal legislation that's going on right now that's relating to the pro-life movement. And one of those has to do with the Hyde Amendment. Some of you may have heard about it. James King, the executive director of the New Jersey Catholic Conference, had this to say: "At a time when our country is experiencing high unemployment, a potential housing crisis, food insecurity, and is recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, one must question why some in Congress are working to allocate billions of taxpayer dollars to pay for abortions when the money could be used to help those struggling to meet basic needs." Now, the key to all of this is there was a removal of several longstanding pro-life protections in the most recent $6 trillion budget for fiscal year 2022. One of those being the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde prohibits federal funds from being used to cover abortion or health plans to cover abortion, except in cases of rape, incest, or when the life of the woman is endangered. The amendment's been around since 1976 and has been reenacted in spending bills every year since it was passed. However, this year, it's been omitted. What the NJC is encouraging people to do is to go and sign an online petition at their website, which is njcatholic.org, which will provide information and a toolkit about the Hyde Amendment and other pro-life issues to help you and others raise awareness amongst the faithful. In addition, the U.S. Catholic Conference of Catholic Bishops is asking the faithful to write to their representatives in Congress, and has also provided a template letter that can be found on the USCCB website, which is usccb.org. So Cardinal Tobin, I was at a I was at a conference with him many years ago, and he had something to say. Basically, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but basically he said that a budget is a theological document. Okay, it says where your priorities are. He was referring to what we as a church need to be doing and where we need to be putting our money that shows where our interests are. But the truth of the matter is that philosophy can be used in anything. And if the federal government is putting its money in areas that it really shouldn't, then it's up to us as Catholics, as people who are pro-life, really make sure that we're holding them accountable, holding people in power accountable, that where we want this money to be used and where we want this money not to be used. So I'm going to encourage you to make sure that you are keeping an eye out for stories like this, which can be found in the Catholic Star Herald and, quite frankly, all of the news publications of all the dioceses. But it's my hope you'll keep an eye on it, and by all means, be an active participant in these concerns. Don't just sit on the sidelines waiting for other people to take up the banner of the pro-life movement or whatever spiritually based movements that you personally have an interest in. Feel free to be that person, to come forward, to put your name to something, to stand in a line, to protest if protesting is appropriate. Be visible and be active. So I would encourage you to do that. One of the things that we don't talk about enough, I think, in our daily lives, we're a culture that focuses on the young quite a bit. Some might say too much, particularly if you see just how much your kids and grandkids are on TikTok. My son is on TikTok quite a lot, but the world is actually not filled just with young people. It's filled with a number of seniors as well. And, around the world, oftentimes seniors can be, for some reason in our global culture nowadays, those of a certain age may be forgotten about or unaffiliated. Their families don't spend enough time with them. Certainly, for those of us who are of a certain age, I'm going to be 50 next year. I've spent almost every weekend with my grandparents. I don't know that the way that families are nowadays, that's the case any longer, to the great detriment of our family life. So I think realizing that, Pope Francis established for July 25th the first World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly. Now, he released a very long letter about that, detailing why he was doing that, but I just want to read a couple passages to you. I am with you always. This is the promise the Lord made to his disciples before he ascended into heaven. They are the words that he repeats to you, dear grandfathers and grandmothers, dear elderly friends. I am with you always. Are also the words that I, as Bishop of Rome and an elderly person like yourselves, would like to address to you this first World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly. The whole church is close to you, to us, and cares about you, loves you, and does not want you to feel alone. I am well aware that this message comes to you at a difficult time. The pandemic swept down on us like an unexpected and furious storm. It has been a time of trial for everyone, but especially for us elderly persons. Many of us fell ill, others died or experienced the death of spouses or loved ones, while others found themselves isolated and alone for long periods of time. And he goes on to say about, the role of our seniors in our lives, people who have seen so much before us, who have been through so much, who have wisdom to partake to us. I'm far closer now to being a senior myself than I am of ever being a teenager again, though many who know me would say I'm quite childlike at heart. I don't know if they mean that as a compliment, but that's not too far from accurate. I hope that those of us who are older will always make an active attempt at engaging with people who are younger than us, ideally with an open mind. A lot of things, I think in every generation, it feels like, the younger generation doesn't have a certain respect for things. The younger generation, their priorities are askew. And I think to a certain degree that might be true. But it's up to us to make sure as older folks that we engage with those young people who may not be interested in talking with us, to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Let me give you my perspective. This is why, not just this is what we did, but this is why we did something 10, 20, 30 years ago. We always had reasons for that. And certainly there have been great advances that have happened over the years, over the decades, and those are all good things. Culturally, we've moved in certain ways that are good, and culturally, we've moved in certain ways that are less good. And I think helping younger people to understand why we did certain things, why we believed certain ways, why we acted in certain ways are probably important. Because as we all know, as people who have an appreciation for history, those who don't understand the past are doomed to repeat it. And we, as older people, we are the people who can explain the past. So I would encourage you to engage with your younger people if you're someone older. And if you're someone younger, do not be afraid to talk to someone who's older. They have a wisdom that you may not yet appreciate, but as you get older, you likely will. My parents are in their mid-70s. I still rely upon advice from my parents all the time. For no other reason than they tend to settle me down a little bit. So I'm not sure everybody's parents do that, but my parents have done a good job of, taking some of the steam out of my anger from time to time when I get a little irate about things. So in honor of the first World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly, I do hope that that all of us can embrace those who've been living on this earth far longer than us, have seen much more than us, and have lived through a great deal more than we have at this point, and are great examples for many of us of good Christian fellowship. So honor your grandparents and the elderly, folks. Speaking of someone who's been around for a little while, if you haven't had a chance, I would encourage everyone to read Bishop Sullivan's last two columns. Bishop Dennis Sullivan, the Bishop of Camden, for the summer has been writing a column series sort of focused on his 50 years as a priest. He celebrated 50 years earlier this year in May. And he sort of decided upon himself that he was going to write a column series on it. So his first column came out in the last edition, and it was about his life as a baby priest. And when as soon as he was ordained, the Archbishop of New York turned to him and said, "You're going to the Dominican Republic for a little while." And at that time, there were a lot of people coming into the New York City area from all over the Caribbean, and the Dominican Republic was one of the largest groups. And he thought it was important to send this little Irish guy from the Bronx down to the Dominican Republic for a few months and sort of embed himself in that culture and learn it, understand it. It's the one thing Bishop Sullivan, well, it's one of many things Bishop Sullivan has said that really made a big difference in his life, in addition to giving him flawless Spanish. Was spending time in an entirely different culture and learning that culture and having an openness and appreciation for that culture. So he has a great deal of respect for his time spent down there. So that was his first one. And then the second one was all about his first placement as a priest at St. Elizabeth Parish in Washington Heights in New York City. If you've seen some ads for the movie In the Heights or the Broadway show In the Heights that came out several years ago, that's where his parish was. Those were the people he was working with. That was why he was sent to the Dominican Republic to learn Spanish so that he could be a good shepherd amongst the people of Washington Heights. And he writes a great letter about it, basically a love letter to Washington Heights and his time there. It was a wonderful time for him. Really kind of set him on a particular path as a priest, that he was able to stay, always be a pastoral priest. Bishop Sullivan is unique amongst bishops in that, he was a pastor for many, many years. For most of his life as a priest, he was a pastor, or he was in pastoral role. He wasn't really an administrator until very late in his life as a priest. And since in his time here, he's been very focused on making sure that he is a pastoral bishop. He makes if there are two things he's most interested in, it's getting more priests, so he's very focused on vocations, and then working with the priests that are there now who are in leadership positions, or as pastor or associate pastors, or as administrators, and making sure that they are doing a good job being responsible to the people in their parishes. So anyway, I would encourage you to read these last two columns in the Catholic Star Herald. They were outstanding. It's available at thecatholicstarherald.org on the web. Certainly, you can find copies of it in and around the Diocese of Camden. But it's a great read, and one that I think a lot of people will see just what, aside of Bishop Sullivan, that maybe you've not read about before. So it's a great thing. He loves talking about his past in New York. He opens up about it and gets quite energetic about it. So it's a good read. So I would encourage you to go read it. Check up on that whole series. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about before we bring in our guest is a little promo for next week's episode. Next week, we're going to have a few folks who help run the Summer in the City program. That's a long-standing program in South Jersey where youth and young adults from around South Jersey come together to work in and around Atlantic City, doing service projects related to their spirituality. They live together in community for a week. We're actually going to have a photographer embedded with them this year. It's going to take place in mid-August. But we're going to talk all about it because if anybody would like to look into signing up for Summer in the City, we're going to have a lot of details for you next week. If you want to jump the gun, you can go to camdendiocese.org and go on to the youth ministry page, and from there you'll learn all about the Summer in the City program. But it's a great program. It's been going on for forever, and next week it'll be Jose Rodriguez and a couple of his acolytes on the show to discuss it more. So that was a very long conversation on my part without, I don't know, maybe saying all that much. But I'm very happy to finally be able to bring in my partner in crime today, who has been on the podcast many times. I'm going to warn you now that towards the end of the podcast, we will be talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe a little bit. I will not be upset if any of you decide to turn off the podcast or change the channel at that point. But for right now, we're going to talk a little bit about fundraising and spirituality, and I'm going to talk with my good friend, Katie Comerford-Rivera, the newly promoted, title changed Associate Director of Fundraising Associate Director of Development for the Diocese of Camden. Hey, Katie.
Hey, Mike. How's it going?
I think we all have too many words in our titles.
I agree. I always mumble over first now I have Comerford-Rivera, so I mumble over that, and then I do the title, and it just gets worse.
Well, yes. But you know what? You get to say it more often. Actually, we don't get to say it that often. That's why we trip over it so much. Other people are usually introducing us by it. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I used to be Associate Director of Development for the House of Charity Bishop's Annual Appeal. I used to have to think about it very, very long and hard before I would say it out loud.
Well, I'm very happy it got shortened. So, Katie, So prior to your title being shortened, the thing you were most focused on was the House of Charity Bishop's Annual Appeal, which for right now is actually ongoing. We had you on back in, I think, late January, early February to talk about the kickoff for the House of Charity. And I wanted to have you come in again and just kind of, if you could give us a little update on how everything is going for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't be more encouraged by the support and the generosity that we've seen this year. As of now, we're at over $5.3 million raised, and we weren't even close to that last year at this time. And obviously, with COVID, we're still seeing, some numbers that are a little lower than previous years before 2020. But I feel like over the next few years, we'll really be able to chip away at it. And we're already seeing the people rise up to the challenge and step up in a way that I just couldn't be more excited and proud to be a part of.
You know, that's the thing that really amazed me. So, we're at the 18th month of, sort of this pandemic times. The thing that really impressed me was just how generous people were, even during the height of the pandemic when everything seemed shut down and closed. God bless all of you who were still donating whatever you could, spending the time to make sure that our parishes and our ministries were being funded. You did an incredible job, and you all deserve a great deal of credit. And I really need to give the pastors a lot of credit, too, who kept working the entire time, realizing that with all the difficulties we had and all the financial problems that were out there, and they did it with such grace, gently encouraging people to remember the church, remember those who are in need. If we had my great co-host Mary McCusker on the podcast today, she would be telling you the same thing, that the needs during the pandemic only intensified. They didn't lower. So, to all of you who continue to give, you certainly have my enduring thanks, and I know you have Katie's enduring thanks, right?
Oh, absolutely. Every time I would talk to a donor and they would talk to me about their story and how they were still trying to donate whatever they could to the House of Charity, it was just such a humbling conversation and experience. And I just think you're all fantastic. We couldn't do what we do without you. And you're absolutely right. I had a lot of questions last year in particular about why we were still running the House of Charity during a pandemic. And the problem was the need was getting bigger and bigger each and every day. So we couldn't stop. We had to continue to raise what we could so we could support the ministries that had growing needs rather than, lessening needs. Yeah. So it was a difficult year, but it was so wonderful to see the people come together as a community.
It really was. And, I think Catholics deserve a lot of credit across the board for keeping the lights on. We've talked on the podcast many, many times about, the work of our Catholic schools. Our Catholic schools now are operating, most of those Catholic schools are now operating with larger enrollments than they had in years because Catholic schools in South Jersey were open 5 days a week the entire year. Closures only from time to time if there was not an outbreak, but if there was we had no outbreaks, but if there were, depending on a couple of infections that might go around, they might have to go remote for a week or two. Or sometimes usually just a small grouping that had to. But what people were really impressed by, particularly parents, was the dedication of schools to remain open, and they have rewarded that dedication by making sure that, in large part, their students are returning. These are kids who did not go to Catholic schools before, but love the fact that the Catholic schools had remained open for the last year, sent their kids to the Catholic schools, and now are keeping the kids in the school. And all the credit to the parents, all the credit to the administrators, and all of the credit to the funders who have made it possible. Now, in the House of Charity, a lot of that money is for scholarship use.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. The money that we designate for Catholic education is for scholarship use.
Yeah. And this is an example where, we've always been, as a Catholic entity and as Catholic schools, very open to making, we know that going to a Catholic school is an expense, but we want to make it as acceptable as possible to that expense, and that's where these scholarship monies really make a big difference in helping to defray the cost of going to a Catholic school for some families who might not be able to if they didn't exist. So, for those of you who have been donating to the House of Charity, thank you for making sure that our schools remain open and vibrant.
Yeah, absolutely. Because honestly, I'm a product of Catholic education, and I would not give that for anything.
Yeah.
It was such an experience, and it's definitely molded me into the person I am today, and probably the profession I'm in today and working for, a diocese.
Absolutely. I'm the same way. The fact that I was, I did 12 straight years, actually 16 if you count college, of Catholic education. And it is every thought in my head, every whatever desires I have, whatever my personal self-interest on staying on the Catholic road is, I can directly attribute to my time in Catholic school. It just made it easy. I think it made it easier to be a Catholic going to Catholic school all the time.
Absolutely.
Because you just have a better feel for it. I was with sisters more often, or women religious more often. I was with priests more often. I was with Catholic lay leaders more often. You prayed at the beginning of every class. You prayed at the beginning of every school day. You prayed at the beginning of every scholastic event, at every athletic event. That is not something that to be looked down upon. That's one of the things you can get at a Catholic institution that certainly in this day and age you're not going to get in a public school institution, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So as we were talking about House of Charity a little bit, what are the other things that it helps in the Diocese of Camden?
So the House of Charity supports a variety of ministries. Some of the main ones, we have Catholic Charities, Catholic education, as we said, St. John of God School, vocations, youth and young adult ministry, Vitality's hospital chaplaincy program, and the list goes on and on and on. Faith formation, all these different areas that could not continue to do as much as they do each and every day without you, the donors.
That's right. But not the communications department. They don't give us any money, and we want to keep it that way because we want all of the money to go to the resources that need it, not the communications department. We'll find our money someplace else. Now for right now, so we talked about it. This kicked off in January, February of earlier this year. But for our shore parishes, they're in the thick of it right now, right?
Yes, they are, and it's a great year for them because last year they didn't really have a campaign at all because nobody was in the pew. So at least with the parishes that had their campaigns in the winter or winter, early spring, they were able to have an in-pew solicitation right before the world shut down.
Yeah.
So the summer really was at a disadvantage from the jump. They had to rely heavily on the mailings rather than the in-person filling out the cards together as a family. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy for them that they get to have that extra bump with the in-person masses this year.
Yeah. And it's, for anyone who's wondering, I was just down in the shore communities this past weekend. I'm happy to report that they are teeming with activity.
Oh.
Our shore parishes are doing very well. The shore businesses are doing very well. A lot of people are down there. I was actually looking to vacation in Ocean City this year, and that was not going to happen because there was no place to rent. Because
Too busy.
Yeah, which is a great sign. These are, I talked about it earlier, and then when I opened the podcast about how these are all things that are good signs, I think, that life is getting back to normal, that we are returning to what we knew things are turning back to, I don't even want to, qualify that. I think things are getting a lot better. Is it 100%? No, but I like the fact that people are out and about again, coming together in a sense of closeness and spirituality. I love the fact that our parishes are, particularly the shore parishes right now during the summer, are, I wouldn't say bursting at the seams. They're being very respectful, but the pews are filled. The people are there. And what's more is, having come through this great global tragedy, people are back in the masses without fear, because I am a pro-vaccine guy. So if you're not, that's fine. But I'm hoping that there's a sense of confidence because of that they're able to get back in and get back to normal. So that's wonderful. Have you heard good reports coming from the shore area?
I have. I think they're definitely raising money much quicker than they did last year. And it seems like it's just busy. There's so much going on. Just like you were going to vacation in Ocean City. We're a Lavalette family. We go there every year. And we tried to get a house. Maybe back in March we tried looking.
Really?
And everything was booked. So they're definitely, they're seeing a lot of guests, a lot of visitors. And I'm sure that's got to be nice for them.
Yeah. I think that's a great sign that that stuff is coming back to normal. So fundraising and spirituality. Now, anytime I have somebody on the podcast where it seems like it's a difficult explanation to see how these two things are related. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about that. The sense of charity, mm-hmm. which is essentially what you're promoting,
yep.
Is actually written right into the faith of Catholicism, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the giving of alms has been has preceded Catholicism. That was a Jewish tenet for eons. And so when people might bristle at the idea that we're discussing faith and fundraising simultaneously, you might retort that they may not understand their own faith enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny you say that because I say this all the time and I sometimes get positive responses. Other times I don't. And it's from Henry Nouwen, fundraising is a ministry. And the ministries that we support through the fundraising couldn't do the work that they do without the charity that you get from the donors. And honestly, when it comes to fundraising, you're inviting somebody into something that you believe in. It's just inviting them to be a part of something bigger than you or me. And I don't think that people always think of it that way. This isn't supposed to be an arm twisting thing. This isn't supposed to be a guilt trip, nothing like that. It's supposed to say, hey, I believe in this, and we need to be able to do X, Y, or Z to continue to do the great work. And your donation can help us do that. Do you want to do this with us? And I don't always feel like people see it that way. I know sometimes they feel like they're getting hit left and right, for money all the time, but it takes, money to be able to continue doing this work.
Yeah. And that's true. We do get hit from every angle, it seems like, with people asking for our money. Mm-hmm. And I try not to get upset about that, because I think it's I think it's their responsibility to make the ask, and then it's our responsibility to be thoughtful about how we're going to spend our money. And I kind of mentioned this earlier with that Cardinal Tobin reference about a budget is a theological. He actually said a financial statement is a theological document. But how you decide to spend your money is very much an indication of what you believe.
Exactly.
If you are a family of four who, and this is not to besmirch anybody, I'm not in the pointing fingers game, but if you're a family of four and you're deciding that you're going to spend $8,000 on a trip to Disney, and $500 to your local church, you have made a declaration of where your interests lie the most, at least during that year. Now, listen, I love Disney World. I think everybody should go to Disney World. I think it's a wonderful place to go. I think people should go on vacations. I think people should see the country, see the world. I think all those things are good things. But I also, while you're thinking about that, I think sometimes you also need to think, okay, that is a good idea. Let me plan for that, while at the same time, I really need to take care of these things that I believe in. And I need to look at my income. I mean, for us as Catholics, what do we say is an appropriate tithing? Is it 5%, 10%, 20%?
I think it's 10%, yeah.
10%, right. Now, if you're crazy people, like my wife and I apparently, we start inching up into the 20% range. And then my wife and I have to have a conversation like, okay, let's go on vacation once. But I've never besmirched my wife's. My wife's an accountant. She handles our funds. So that's why I'm talking about her right now. Even though from time to time I have bristled at the fact that we couldn't go anywhere, I've never once thought twice about it for a second where we were donating our money, because the truth of the matter is those things are important to us. They're important to me. They're important to her. We're trying to instill that sense of importance in our son. So it is important that we remember that maybe it is better to give to the House of Charity this year than go to Disney. Now, keep in mind, I told my son when we went to Disney when he was 6 years old, he goes, when are we going to go back again? In 10 years, I said. And he goes, why? I said, that's how long it's going to take us to save up money to come back again. But that's, I think, the culture that we live in right now is very me-centered, right? We as Catholics and people of all faiths should I hope think this way, that we should be very they-centered. Like, what can I do for them? What can I do for this person? What can I do for this ministry? And which is something that I think, have to help people fight against. I have to help people fight against. You've certainly been out there you and I got to meet each other for the first time related to, pushing a sales call, not a sales call, but a donation call. And, it's a hard, those asks are hard things for people to do. Both the person asking sometimes has difficulty with it, and the person being asked has difficulty with it. How do you help people with that?
That's a really good question. So I think my first step with anybody, because it's normal to be nervous when you're asking for money. It's not a comfortable thing, especially if you're a volunteer, because for us, many of the people we use, other than the pastors, are volunteers that are just dedicating their time to helping a cause. We have to make sure they believe and 100% understand the cause, because once they are 100% in favor of what they're trying to raise money for, it's easier. And once they completely understand what this cause is, they'll have a much easier time answering any questions that the person they're speaking to has as they're walking through the process, because sometimes a simple answer to a question will change somebody's mind as to whether they're going to give or not. And also, just letting them know this isn't an arm twisting thing. It's just allowing somebody else the opportunity to be a part of something great. And then it's their job to make their own educated decision on whether they can and want to give to this cause. And that decision's between them and God, nobody else. Yeah. So once they understand that, you're educating them. Yes, you're asking them for money, but there's no arm twisting. There's no guilt trip. There's nothing like that. Sometimes, it gets a little easier, and also practice makes perfect. So if they have a couple in the bag where they can, get their butterflies out, it gets easier after it goes on, because I was nervous when I first started. But after, 7-8 years, I'm feeling a lot better about it.
Listen, I actively avoided it until I came to work here, met you actually. You were a vendor at that time. Yep. You weren't even working for the diocese. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And, we were working on the Changing Our World campaign at that time. And the pastor that was not the pastor at my parish was having difficulty with, the idea of presenting to the parish a full-throated support of Catholic Strong, the Catholic Strong campaign, which is separate from the House of Charity. And, one thing led to another. And since it was my former home parish, it was like, well, Mike, would you do it? And I'd never done anything like that ever. I'd never asked for money. I never did anything. I hated, when I was a kid, I used to hate, we would do fundraising in grade school, selling magazines to our, aunts and uncles. I hated it with a passion. But because I think I worked here and I knew that everything that the Catholic Church did, because I had been a part of it now for, at that time, 3 or 4 years, I could talk authentically about why it was so important that we, as Catholics, had to be willing to undertake this Catholic Strong initiative. And the same thing goes with the House of Charity. And quite frankly, for people, when your diocese, when your parish comes to you with a capital campaign or any kind of fundraising campaign, I know there's always a first reaction to, fill in the blank, just wants our money. Parish, diocese, school, something like that. Well, yes, they do, but it's not because they're evil ogres, and it's certainly not because we're looking to fleece the population. It's because there are all of these services that genuinely require financial interest. It just is. We live in a very real world here. That it's a capitalistic culture. It's a capitalistic world. It requires payment to be able to make things happen, and there are a lot of people in the world that are in need of a lot of stuff, and this is not just for the needy. I should also point out that our vocations program is solely run on donations to the House of Charity. You're talking about how we're able to foster the future priesthood, the very core of a lot of where our faith is driven from is the priesthood, and we need 2 things from the people. We need you to help find other people who have a calling to it, who God has called but may be reluctant. We've had so many seminarians, priests, and vocations directors on this program have all said the exact same words to me. I thought I had a calling, but I didn't want to go, so I refused. Until somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said something to the effect of, you'd be a great priest. And this goes for the women religious we've had on too. Every single woman religious we've had on has said the exact same thing. I felt something, but I didn't want to do it until somebody talked to me about it. So that's the importance of people like us, seeing someone who has a glint in their eye, who could potentially be a women religious, men's religious, priest, whatever, and saying those words to them for the first time.
Wow, that's interesting.
Oh, yeah. Every single priest I've ever had on here has said that, with the possible exception of one, no, even him, have all said the exact same thing, is that I had the thought, I resisted the thought. Somebody else had to say it to me. Once somebody else said it to me, that was when I was inspired to consider it as a possible reality. And then they go through the process.
Wow.
And then there might be discernment in, there might be discernment out.
Yeah.
But they go through the process of vocations, which is why it's 8 years long. I was actually talking to our friends, the CFR sisters in Atlantic City, and they were telling me about some of their novitiates, and I'd asked them how long the process was, and they said, oh, it's 8 years. It's 8 years before you make your final vows. And for some reason, I was shocked by that, and I said that to the sister I was talking to, and she turned to me and she goes, it's a lifetime decision. You really want to really spend some time thinking about it. I said, no, you make perfect sense. I don't know why I thought the women religious would be any shorter, but certainly, 8 years till you reach your final vows. So that's the one thing we ask of people, is to always look for vocations in their midst. And then the other thing we look to them for is, to help support this community. And we ask them to do it financially, which I know can be difficult. And all of us have lots of expenses and finite amount of resources. So we have to be smart about how we're using it. But it's important. Yeah.
And every dollar counts, It's your own personal sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes it hurts. But here's something you've taught me in the past, was that certain sacrifices are supposed to hurt a little bit.
Yep.
So you have your weekly donation at Mass, whether you give online or in person in the basket. That's usually considered a fairly simple donation, one that you can sort of plan for the entire year. You kind of know how much you're going to give, and you either parcel it out per week, or if you're like my wife and I, we donate quarterly online. There's a little secret for you, everybody. You do not have to give once a week if you don't want to. You can give at whatever rate is most appropriate for you. Quarterly actually works best for us. Some people give monthly. Some people just give one time a year, and then they give again the next year, right? These are all perfectly reasonable gift options, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So you can use a system that's the best for you. Don't feel like if you're not putting an envelope in the basket, people are judging you. They might be, but I got news for you. You get past it real fast. There's something nice about seeing the basket go past me, knowing that's right, I already gave.
Exactly.
And then so that's the first your weekly donation, and then you have an annual donation. First for us, it's called the House of Charity Bishop's Annual Appeal. That one's another one where you can sort of plan it in advance. You know, in the case of the House of Charity, House of Charity's been very stable. The ministries that support have been pretty much stable since for the last 10 years at least, I think. Yeah. So you kind of know where that money is going. You know, every winter you're going to get an ask. That one is one you can kind of prepare for, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. And you have 10 months or more to pay it off.
Yeah. So plenty of time, nothing to be scared about. And what, like you were saying, you get a little card. It gives you all these amounts on it, kind of breaks it down, at least the way we do it, like how much that would cost per week, or whatnot. You get a real feel. Everyone's very transparent. We try to make it easy on people. And then the third gift is usually like a campaign gift. For us, when we did the Catholic Strong, that was the first time there had been a diocesan capital campaign in 17 years, I think.
Yeah.
And that one we were quite upfront about, because we knew how much needed to be raised, and we knew how difficult it was going to be. And we referred to that one as a sacrificial gift.
Yeah, the painful one.
That was going to be a painful one. And we were quite upfront with people about it. It's like, yes, this may be difficult. That this may hurt a little bit. You may have to actually give up a few things to make this kind of a donation. The thing that was amazing to me was how many people made the sacrificial gift. Yep. Like, I remember having the conversation with my wife. It was no guarantee that we were going to donate in a large number to the to the Catholic Strong campaign, but we literally did. We sat down, we prayed about it, we thought about it, and I still remember my wife goes, "Well, how much do you think we should give?" And I go, "Well, I think we should give this much." And she goes, "I think we can give more." I said, "Okay, well then let's do that." And we talked about it a little bit, and she made her pitch, and I went, okay, well, let's do that. And so then we made I actually can't remember what our gift was. You can probably look it up in the records, but I forget what our gift was. But But we didn't feel pressure to do it. It was literally, we talked to people. The pastor made his pitch. I certainly was working for you guys at the time, but I didn't, my conversations with my wife, it was not me pitching the idea because I knew I worked at the diocese. So I kind of wanted to hear what her reaction was going to be. And apparently it was very useful to Catholic Strong because she was really impressed by whatever we had talked about and in our materials and decided to give a nice hefty donation out of it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
All that time spent. It worked out.
Yes, it did. I mean, I even had somebody call in and say that they were going to give up their cable so they could make a donation to the campaign. I could not believe that. I was like, wow.
Yeah. I would have that would be a hard sacrifice for me, but I appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, just thinking about not having my shows, I just couldn't thank that woman more. Knowing the sacrifice that it would be very painful for me.
Yeah, that would particularly pre-pandemic. That would be a tough goal because a lot of us relied on television during the pandemic. But so we talk about all these things to sort of help people to remember that when you're being asked to give, it's not intended to make your life miserable.
Yeah.
It's not intended to create difficulty. And nobody's expecting you to give anybody $1 million. It's great if you want to, but give what you think is appropriate and what you think the need requires. So. Yeah. Was there any other perspectives you want to talk about giving?
No, I couldn't have said it better myself, Mike.
Okay, then in which case you gave us the perfect segue of talking about television. So everybody, we're going to talk about Marvel a little bit right now. Feel free to leave, and if you're listening to this on the radio, you can come back in about 10 minutes. So I am a huge Marvel nerd. Katie married a huge Marvel nerd.
Yes, I did.
And has become a Marvel nerd because of it. The pandemic, for most of us, we had to rely on streaming video shows. So for the two of us as Disney Plus owners, we were streaming a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe television shows on Disney Plus. So earlier this year was WandaVision. Then after that was Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And for me, anyway, just wrapping up was a series called Loki. And in the middle of that, we had our first Marvel movie come out called Scarlet Witch. No, not
Black Widow.
Black Widow. Why do I get that messed up? Black Widow. So
Best
Black
movie
Widow.
ever.
So let's see. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being highest, how much did you enjoy WandaVision?
10. Agreed. Loved it.
Me too. For those of you who are still listening and might be of an older age, the WandaVision theme that ran throughout was sort of a history of television sitcoms. So the first episode opened up into a very much a what would you say? I Love Lucy / Dick Van Dyke Show was sort of what it looked like, and the level of detail in making a television show like that was fantastic. Like, it really did look as if it was out of that era. Black and white, no CGI, all practical effects with a hidden string and stuff like that. It was really impressive.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I was wondering where they were going to go with the show after that episode, but once, it got to episode 3 or so and you realized what was happening, it was such a cool concept.
Yeah.
So cool.
It really was. And the Emmys have bestowed a great deal of greatness on it as well. I think it's like one of the most nominated shows ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. The Mandalorian, and another show I can't remember, but just got a ton of Emmy awards. Or Emmy nominations, not Emmy awards, Emmy nominations. So that series goes through. Great series. It combined a lot of the practical universe of the MCU with the cosmic universe of the MCU, I guess is a way to put it. Mystical part of the MCU. And then so we won't give any spoilers for people who haven't heard it yet.
Can I just say my favorite line in the entire series?
Yes.
They recast Pietro?
that is a great line that I wish we could talk about it, but
I know.
I do encourage anybody who's has even the slightest inkling of the MCU. If you haven't gotten your Disney Plus, it is worth the effort. There's a lot of great stuff on there. A lot of great Disney properties on there. The Star Wars stuff is all wonderful. So I don't mean this to be a plug for Disney Plus or the MCU, just that. There's a lot of very creative people out there, and the MCU the Marvel Cinematic Universe might be the most creative of them all. There's a little bit of everything for a lot of stuff. The Black Widow movie that came out, I think, unlike a lot of the other production houses, there's been a lot of women empowerment that comes through the MCU, and that was another great example of it.
Yes.
And which I can tell from all the women that I know who kind of never felt like they had an in to this sort of nerd universe. Starting with Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. Everyone fell in love with that movie, and it wasn't just a great movie for women. That was a great movie. These are all fantastic movies, but you get great female representation out of them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It actually made me sad watching Black Widow because it made me realize, because I was thinking women empowerment too, but then it made me think of Endgame and that one part where it was the women empowerment scene where they were all together supporting each other, and I was like, Black Widow wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. No spoilers. Well, if you haven't seen Endgame at this point, you're on your own. You know what? That's 2 years ago now.
That's what I figured with Endgame. I won't give any Black Widow spoilers away.
So Black Widow wasn't part of this great. It was They actually had a phrase for it in the comics, and I can't remember what it was, but it was basically a female team up thing that occurred, and I remember watching it in the movie theater, and like I actually got a chill going.
Me too.
There's a thing out of the comic books. It's all the women came together to battle Thanos. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I'm getting the chills now thinking about it.
It was really great.
Yeah,
and that was the other great thing about Black Widow was it takes place prior to Endgame having happened. It really gives a lot of backstory on Black Widow and her, using air quotes, family.
Yep.
And her past. It's the only downside is the only complaint, not even a complaint, criticism. That's not even a word. I wish this movie had been done 5 years earlier, because it would have just fit into the run so much better. I think it's a great coda onto her, great epilogue to her career or her arc in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though it took place. Okay, for anyone who doesn't know, she dies in Endgame. But it's a pivotal death, a very important death, a sacrificial death, as a matter of fact, to sort of save everyone. It's if you're going to go out, she kind of goes out in a way that's a hero of that caliber would. I hope there's a statue of her somewhere in the MCU when we come back from Endgame. But yeah, so it was a great movie, and we only have like a minute or two, but Falcon and the Winter Soldier was a great sort of that was a continuation of the Captain America franchise, sort of political intrigue, governmental intrigue. But also that one actually did deal with the ramifications of a post-Endgame world where countries had now changed, but then everybody comes back, and how does a guy like the Winter Soldier, who's been an assassin for the last 70 years, come back and live in that world? That was great. Turns out he's got a thing for Falcon's sister. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there were great elements to that, and then currently is Loki, and then Loki is right out of the cosmic universe with everything that entails. And I watched the entire series. Katie has not seen the whole thing yet, but that one is thoroughly enjoyable, and that one actually sets up the next phase 4, I guess, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
That's what my husband was saying. So we definitely got to catch up.
Yeah. Well, you got time, because nothing happens. We got another movie coming out in August, and then another movie coming out in November.
What's the next one coming out?
Shang-Chi. That's the one coming out. So that's a comic I don't know that much about, so I am looking forward to it. And then after that, the Eternals come out in November. So I'm looking forward to that one. And then in December, the next Spider-Man comes out. And then in February, the next Doctor Strange comes out.
Do you have any idea when the next Guardians is going to come out? Because I have a feeling it's a Thor Guardians thing.
Guardians, so the next Thor one is the one that has a little bit of Guardians in it. That's Thor: Love and Thunder. That comes out in May.
Okay.
And I wish I had all the stuff in front of me, but there's also another Disney Plus show that comes out, I think, in December as well, and that'll be the Hawkeye Kate Bishop crossover. So
that's going to be awesome.
It's going to be. I'm going to lose so much money on movies over the. I think I'm going to sign up on one of those loyalty things so that I can watch all these movies. But there's a lot coming out. So for those of us who are Marvel junkies, it's going to be a good year.
Yes, it will.
Yeah. So anybody, thank you very much for sticking with us. And Katie, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. And remember, don't be afraid to fundraise and donate. And just be smart about it and be spiritual about it and be reflective about it. All right, everybody. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.